The very first monster you're introduced to in Dungeons & Dragons is the Fire Giant, right there on the front cover. Painted by Tyler Jacobson, it captures the ferocity and might of a giant preparing to confront a group of adventurers in his fiery domain. The art is iconic, and these giants are a fan favorite among both players and DMs. But how would they look in our homebrew world, Therenor? My name is Crazy K, and this is the 4th video in our Reimagining Giants series. Today we're taking a look at fire giants, master craftsmen and militant slavers who call the fiery volcanic regions of the Forgotten Realms their home. We'll be redesigning them to better fit the rust-red dunes of the Needle Sands, a blazing desert where only the most resourceful of creatures can survive. My goal by the end of this video is to showcase the brutal reality of proving oneself in fire giant culture, while also developing a unique desert region that fire giants not only survive, but thrive in. This channel received a ton of attention after our last video on Brock, the Hill Giant King, and we wanted to say thank you for all the wonderful comments and amazing world-building ideas you all left. There's so much creativity flooding our feeds every morning, and it's truly inspiring to read. If you want to play a direct role in helping us build the world of Therenor, you should participate in our community polls, where we ask questions about what content we should cover next, and ask for help on settling design choices for our world. Our last poll influenced the final design of the flightless avian megafauna you'll see later on in this video. Just as a reminder, if you like giant-themed world-building content, give the channel a like and a subscribe, and take a look at our other Reimagining Giant videos. So far we've covered hill, stone, and frost giants. All speed paints showcased in this video are done by Lee, and you can follow her on both Instagram and YouTube. In the Forgotten Realms, fire giants are massive, blocky humanoids similar to shapen dwarves, with skin as dark as coal and fiery heads of red or orange hair. Living in small family groups within mountains and volcanoes, they were ingenious smiths, whose forging abilities rivaled that of the dwarves. Constructing formidable fortresses in hot climates, they were impervious to intense heat and fire, but were often susceptible to the cold. Fire giant society was militaristic, valuing bravery, battle prowess, and craftsmanship above all. They were known to enslave Fomorians, Verbeegs, and even gnomes and dwarves, using them as laborers in their strongholds. Fire giants also commonly captured high-value hostages and held them for ransom, or extorted local villages for their gold to ward off their own attack. Because so much of fire giant society is based around strength and combat skill, fire giants were often illiterate. Like frost giants, the fire giants frequently fought creatures simply to test their might. They would launch rocks, heated in lava to weaken their opponents, before engaging in close quarters combat, favoring long swords enchanted with flames as their weapon of choice. Fire giants practiced rune casting and sorcery, however their skills were minimal compared to the magic cast by cloud and storm giants. The heads of fire giant societies were priests, tasked with ensuring other members of their tribes remained productive. Fire giants were known to worship multiple gods, like Surtur, Hiatia, and Kosuth, and they would perform complex dances around massive fire pits and lava flows to appease them. The heat from these dances were so intense it often caused other races who observed or joined in to hallucinate terrifying creatures which tried to harm them. And that was a quick general summary of how fire giants are in the Forgotten Realms. It's not a whole lot, but they're still a fan favorite among the other giants in Dungeons & Dragons. They're even on the front cover of the player's handbook. Quite a few people have mentioned they love how similar in appearance they look to Ganondorf, and honestly we feel the exact same way. So there's parts of these designs that we really don't want to let go of. For instance, we love the fact that they're craftsmen, and the general style of their armor is very neat, so we want to try and keep that as part of their identity. In the end, I think we've come up with a very unique aesthetic, which takes our favorite parts of fire giants and shuffles them around a bit to create something brand new. Before we showcase our reimagined fire giants, we should probably show off the region that these fire giants inhabit. Nalansander, or the Needle Sands, as it's known by the small folk, is a massive desert tucked between two mountain ranges in eastern Therenor. The sands, a deep and vibrant reddish-orange in color, contain high traces of iron, and it is said that sandstorms in the region are exceptionally brutal, as if one is being poked by thousands of tiny daggers. Blocked from both the north's frigid winds and the warm ocean currents off the far east coast, the dunes bake in Therenor's sun, making them near inhabitable for any creature not keenly adapted to this environment. Come nightfall, the desert plummets to well below freezing as the sun's warmth leaves the sands. Hazardous nocturnal creatures rise from their slumber, stalking the dunes in search of their next meal. Even with these obstacles, small folk still manage to survive, slowly but surely establishing camps deeper into the desert in hopes of finding new and exciting resources to bring back to their cities. As the sands shift, remnants of abandoned camps, temples, and old-world cities may briefly resurface, ripe for plundering. Bold adventurers might try and predict where these ruins will appear, setting out into the desert in search of treasure before they are swallowed up once more. While rare, some relics have made their way out of the dunes. Most commonly, idols of Soltauger, the spirit of hunger and harvests, as well as Ignolin, the embodiment of the desert's warmth and a spirit prayed to for strength, forgiveness, and unity. Rumor has spread, however, of a massive city of wealth deep in the desert. Whether this city exists or not is up for debate, as any small folk who has gone into the dunes searching for it has never returned. In Therenor, fire giants are cold-blooded humanoids who have labored in the needle sands for untold ages, constructing a massive city of iron and ceramic deep in the desert. They stand at about 24 feet tall. Their skin is scaled and thick, like dragon hide, and they have a flattened backplate which helps absorb the intense heat radiated from the sun. Patterned in colors ranging from reddish-orange to tan, gray, and even charcoal, the durability of their scales and their ability to tolerate scorching temperatures renders them impervious to both fire and molten rock. These giants also sport dense, corded manes and a long whip-like tail, used to keep the desert swarms of biting insects at bay. Their fingers and toes are long and thin, useful for digging through sand and dashing across the dunes, while their third eyelid shields their eyes from sandstorms and smoke. Fire giants are tireless workers, spending most of every waking hour building, smithing, or farming, stopping only when the desert sun sets and the frigid nighttime temperatures sends their bodies into a state of torpor. Extremely reactive to heat, the giants will remain motionless until the morning sun warms them up once more. Masters of crafting and metallurgy, fire giants make detailed sets of armor out of iron extracted from the sands of their homes. Small pores along the giant's fingers and palms exhibit unique magnetic qualities, allowing them to pull iron filings directly from the sand. These filings, when compressed tightly within their hands, heat up and become malleable, which the giant can then use to sculpt armor, weapons, and jewelry, almost as if they are working with clay. Fire giant armor usually contains an area that can be loaded with white coals, molten slag, or firewood, which allows a giant to retain heat and continue to work through the frigid desert night. Fire giants are also fond of piercings, forging intricate rings, hoops, and studs to adorn their face, ears, and neck, and these piercings glow white-hot during midday. Most fire giants live in Ilderheim, a stunning oasis city composed of deep red ceramic and blackened iron, constructed over centuries by the most resourceful and resilient of all giants. It is here that fire giants have continued to develop technological advancements to improve their quality of life, one of which is the domestication of native oasis megafauna, such as these gargantuan throat-pouched Struthianiforms. The nearly 30-foot-tall flightless birds thrive in the oasis, wading through the waters and feeding on a strictly pescatarian diet using a very patient hunting method. The birds will enter the oasis shallows and lower their mouths to the waterline, allowing their throat pouches to expand. As the sun rises, they wait, motionless, and small fish seeking shelter from both the warming surface water and predators unknowingly enter the bird's mouth. Females have dusty beige and brown plumage, while males exhibit striking orange and yellow colors. Both birds often appear greenish in hue, as oasis algae has stained their feathers, but their true colors break through in bands as they preen themselves. During the breeding season, Males will fill their vibrant orange throat pouches with water and wave them about, seemingly to attract the attention of a female. Once mated, the birds are bonded for life. Fire giants use these animals both as sturdy mounts and to gather large pouchfuls of sand, allowing them to sift and extract iron at much faster rates. Another advancement is the construction of homes that function similarly to kilns, maintaining a very high internal temperature, allowing fire giants to craft for days or weeks on end. Most of Ilderheim's buildings are designed this way, ornately carved ceramic walls inlaid with precious metals, and flat or domed roofs forged from darkened iron. Some buildings are multi-storied, with soaring towers and grand staircases connecting the many city levels. Before the sun sets, fire giants scale their buildings and cling to the roofs, discussing tomorrow's plans with their neighbors and waiting for the cold desert night to take them. Come daybreak, as the giants bask in the morning sun, the metal roofs help to transfer additional heat to their bodies, reawakening the city once more. Primarily herbivorous, fire giants farm, constructing elevated gardens to sustain their community. The ample vegetation among their oasis home also bears fruit year-round. With easy access to food, giants in the oasis dedicate most of their lives to mastering their craftsmanship, forging gifts for their neighbors and engaging in competitive blacksmithing competitions. Fire giants looking to relax or converse with their neighbors may also use one of the city's many bathhouses, a popular pastime within Ilderheim. When it comes to relationships, fire giants have been known to have one or even multiple partners, and female giants may lay a clutch of 4 to 6 eggs a year. The fire giants of Ilderheim are closely bonded to their neighbors, though this level of camaraderie is not instinctual to them. If their hatchlings are to join them in their oasis city, they must first learn the importance of kinship in a dangerous and ritualistic journey. After the year's spawning period, the clutches of all fire giants are collected and brought to the entrance of Ilderheim. One of the city's eldest giants will lead a short prayer to Ignolin, asking the spirit to guide their children true and instill them with the strength to survive, before mounting one of the oasis birds and departing with the collected clutch, heading deep into the desert. They will travel until they eventually expire. Soon enough, amongst the dunes, the clutch will hatch, feeding off the deceased before beginning their voyage back home. Fire giant hatchlings are fully independent from birth and have multiple specialized senses to help them survive in the unforgiving deserts. These hatchlings will cover themselves with sand and use electroreception to detect the presence of heartbeats beneath the dunes, burrowing towards it and catching small mammals, insects, and lizards to consume. Each fire giant also instinctively knows the direction of their spawning grounds, using magnetoreceptive sensors in their hands to recall the uniquely intense magnetic field of their home, back from when they were still in their eggs. They travel during the day, scurrying across the sands fueled by the sun's rays. Come nightfall, fire giant hatchlings will bury most of their body underground, leaving their backplate exposed to absorb more heat come sunrise. Fire giants need to be resourceful in order to protect themselves out in the desert. Young fire giants will practice their blacksmithing on their travels, shaping heated metal within their hands into crude weapons and armor. They will routinely craft new equipment for themselves and discard old pieces in the desert, which are either used by other fire giants or resmelted to be made into new gear. As they continue their trek towards the oasis, the forged equipment will decrease in abundance, but increase in both size and quality. Alternatively, fire giants can create molten iron for the sole purpose of spraying or slinging it towards attackers. It is not uncommon to find solidified chunks of pure iron scattered throughout the needle sands, marking past struggles amongst the dunes. There are many desert predators capable of taking down a younger fire giant. While clever minds and skilled craftsmanship go far, unity is the strongest tool a giant has to ward off threats. One fire giant may be worth the struggle to hunt, but a dozen fire giants is a death sentence for any would-be predator. Through resourcefulness, ingenuity, and a willingness to cooperate with their clutchmates, hatchlings will traverse the needle sands and find their way back to Ilderheim. those who return to the city are welcomed with open arms, assimilating into fire giant society and spending the rest of their days in the oasis. Of course, not all fire giants reside in Ilderheim. Giants who commit grave crimes may be exiled from the city and cast back out into the desert, while others have never made it to the city in the first place, instead choosing to form their own settlements or spend their days in the desert alone. These giants may have had difficulty forming a bond with their clutch, lost faith in their tracking abilities, or have a history of duping and backstabbing. With no access to the lush plant life of the oasis, desert fire giants are strictly carnivores, feeding off large insects and mammals which often take multiple giants to slay. These giants stay close not out of kinship, but necessity and personal gain. Giants outside of Ilderheim have more unpredictable personalities, and caution is advised if you happen to encounter one. So these are Therenor's fire giants. We had a unique challenge of designing a desert society where its buildings are made to trap heat instead of protect from it. Things you might expect to see, like awnings galore, breathable and light clothing, shadowed areas for people to gather, and closed-off roofing, are nearly absent from the city, as the fire giants thrive and rely on the warmth of the desert. While this is the perfect place for a fire giant, Ilderheim would be a very uncomfortable, likely unbearable place to visit for longer than a few days. I would definitely recommend any adventurers heading to Ilderheim to stock up on fire-resistant armor or potions. When it comes to designing the fire giants themselves, just as we've done with the other giants so far, we wanted to take their look away from the typical regular giant man with an elemental theme and colorful skin, to something that feels more harmonious with nature and with the setting. We thought taking them in a lizard-like direction would suit their themes of heat and the habitat of the desert, as they are cold-blooded and rely on the desert sun to function. Instead of making their hair flame-like or just straight-up fire, we emulated the beard typical of giants by giving them fleshy spikes inspired by thorny devils or bearded dragons, and hair more akin to a crest or to tendrils. Fire giants, regardless of gender, sport this scaly beard, and they often pierce these spikes as a cultural fashion. We imagined these piercings would glow white-hot from the intense heat of their bodies and their homes, an obvious indicator that they can tolerate the scorching temperatures of the sands. We wanted the fire giants to have sort of a dichotomy to them, an appearance that could be quite menacing to an outsider, but with a welcoming society and personalities that deviate totally from both their look and from the Forgotten Realms fire giants. They appear dangerous, but our fire giants aren't slavers. They don't capture targets and hold them for ransom, and they don't extort neighboring towns for goods. If someone were to make it to Ilderheim, they would be celebrated for their strength and survivor's spirit, proving they already belong just by being there. They're a compassionate and considerate people who understand the importance of teamwork and unity. Of course, not all members of one species behave the exact same, which can be seen in fire giants who choose to stay away from the city. When it comes to their armor, we wanted to strike a balance of that heavy metal, dark industrial look that's been established, and a more ornamental and well-crafted design inspired by historical armor, tiles, and architecture from places with hot and dry climates. This blended into a unique aesthetic that feels well-suited to the region and to our fire giants as a whole. This also bled into the design of the buildings, which feature ornate metal panels and dark ceramic tiles with iron embellishments. We had to design buildings that were made to trap heat as well. A domed metal roof allows extra heat to be absorbed into that material, which could then be transferred into a fire giant that's laying directly on it, and walls made out of ceramic can trap inside heat, getting temperatures up to intense levels. When it came to Ilderheim's giant oasis birds, the community suggested option 2 best fit the environment. We also took some inspiration from option 4, specifically making the beak around the bird's eyes darker to prevent sun glare, while also adding some additional color to the male's beak and feathers. To better differentiate between male and female, we also shrunk the female's crest slightly. I like to imagine the plumage of the female oasis birds would also look more like the first option if the feathers were stained that greenish tint. Another thing to note is this species actually doesn't have a name yet. We're looking for something that acknowledges their massive height while also alluding to the way that they hunt or their generally docile disposition. We would love to hear some suggestions, so if you have one, comment below. Finally, the fire giant babies needed to be designed in a way that showcased they were certainly young, but developed enough to be fully functional, unlike our infant frost giants. They're bipedal, but they have these very scrawny limbs and pudgy bellies, and they're lacking any tendril-like growths on their heads or tails. We also wanted to find a way to show that these fire giants are growing and adapting as they get closer to Ilderheim, and we think the quality of their discarded armor improving was a fun way of hinting at that. And that's our fire giants. Stick around for a narrative piece where our giant researcher recalls his near-death experience in the dunes of Nallansander. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a wonderful one. After my close encounter with the frost giants of the north, I could not wait to return to warmer climates. While the memory of my life-or-death experience was burned into my mind, I yearned for another up-close encounter with these magnificent primordial beings. Next time, I wanted to be more prepared. A few years of saving wealth and consulting my research, I settled on journeying east to a region which rivals the inhospitable nature of the tundra, Nallansander. I entered one of the many settlements that have since popped up along the edge of the Needle Sands, in search of accompaniment on my journey into the desert. Recent decades have seen much more activity in the sands. Word must have spread that there are unimaginable spoils hidden beneath the dunes for those foolish enough to go looking. I had enough stored wealth to pay for a small caravan of treasure hunters, ones who I assured would walk away with any and all valuables we find, as long as they provided me with the room to conduct my research. After ensuring we had enough food and drink to last us to the next checkpoint, we were off. It took time to acclimate to traveling through the Needle Sands. There is little to no wind, with only the strongest bursts making it through the mountain ranges. This leads to rare but powerful sandstorms, which shift large swaths of desert in short bursts. At night, the dunes nearly freeze over, and all manner of massive insects and mammalian predators emerge from the sand to feed. There are always at least 2 people awake and actively guarding the camp. In case one is grabbed in the night, the other can alert the rest of the group to fight or flee. Fortunately, in the many months we have spent in the desert, this has only happened twice. I've kept myself busy by surveying the landscape for any giant activity. Occasionally we would observe packs of lizard-like humanoids scurry across the dunes. Ever slightly taller than goblins, they matched the descriptions I read of fire giants, minus the size, of course. Some of them even wore crude, oversized iron scraps, roughly fashioned into helmets, chest pieces, and shoulder pads. They traveled north, deeper into the desert, their thin, lanky legs carrying them across the sands, and I instructed my party to follow them at a safe distance. Getting too close warranted a barrage of molten iron, which my group was more than happy to collect once they cooled. These lizard men were faster than us, however, and soon enough we would lose them in the sands. By this point we have traveled for nearly 8 months. Our supplies are beginning to wane, but we have made note of small oases scattered throughout Nallansander that should be fertile enough to scavenge from if we need to turn back. We are due for a sandstorm soon, and my hired company has grown restless of giant searching and has demanded we wait until it passes to scavenge the area for ruins. Reluctantly, I agreed, and we set up camp. It was on the 3rd night that our fabled sandstorm arrived, its whipping sands blasting us from all sides. Even through multiple layers of protection, we could feel the stinging pains of the desert envelop our body, like a swarm of ravenous insects looking to feed. Our belongings scattered in the wind, and our company was soon to follow. Once we collected ourselves, dazed and confused from the storm's might, one member of our band noticed part of a tower rising out of the sands. Closer investigation revealed it to be a church, one of a few half-submerged buildings from a long-abandoned village now resurfaced. I was more than content with allowing my compatriots to plunder as they please, and while they planned their trek into the dungeon, I regathered our supplies and set up camp once more. I was told their first run should take no longer than 4 hours before they resurfaced for the morning's food and drink, and so I tended to my tomes and journal while they began. At 6 hours and no sign of a crew, I assumed they were preoccupied. Come supper, 10 hours later, I suspected the worst. The following morning, my fears were realized, as I observed a dozen or so desiccated arms gently poking through the sand, clawing at the sky and attempting to resurface after years of burial. I am now on my own. I gathered my personal belongings, said a quick prayer for both myself and the dead, and continued forth. By now, I have lost count of the days. My companions have long since succumbed to the wastes, the tattered remains of their gear sustaining me thus far. I could feel my magic withering by the minute. My lungs burned and my eyes struggled to stay open from the scratching of the abrasive sand. As I trudged, my body just barely allowing me to take steady steps, thoughts passively floated through my mind. I had so much more about this world I wanted to learn. The thought of magics beyond my power that I will never come to understand taunted me like sprites flittering just out of reach. Before I knew it, my cheek was flushed to the hot sand, searing my face. It felt comfortable for a moment, like the feeling of confessing a dearest love, and I sighed as my face relaxed into it. While my consciousness flickered, I heard something between the swishing and tinkling of sand grains. Music? I'd smile if I had the strength, the humor of it all. One final hallucination to send me off to another realm. Except, it did not stop. Instead, it was accompanied now by deep, hissing voices far in the distance, and sounds of footsteps that landed quickly, kicking up puffs of dust as they approached. Soon enough, blackness. When I awoke, I was submerged up to my neck in warm oasis water, resting under the shade of a massive desert palm. As my eyes adjusted to my new surroundings, I realized I was crowded by dozens of towering reptilian humanoids. Their slender, chiseled faces expressed a range of worry, amusement, and curiosity. One giant, a lithe, aged woman with bronze-colored scales and maroon spines which ran down her chin and neck, broke through the crowd. Reja, she was called, greeted me warmly and asked for my name and my story. I introduced myself as Mamren Bazagal, traveling sage and scholar of all things giant-like. I recalled my experience in the deserts, and how I never would have gotten here if it wasn't for the brave travelers who guided me this far. The giant stirred in reaction to my words, but Reja just looked at me deeply. I felt a sense of reminiscence and understanding from her gaze, as a third eyelid screened over her eyes in a flash of white. She straightened herself as she turned to face the distant oasis waters. "You have done well to come here. As Mamren Bazagal, you have entered the clear and thin blood of paradise, and as Mamundhilder you emerge, soaked in new life." The crowd buzzed once more. Their scaled skin crinkled and their tails kicked up glittering sand as they motioned towards me and chattered amongst themselves. I wanted to shed a tear, but my body had no moisture to give. I was happy just to be alive. The giants call this place Ilderheim, and in the number of weeks I've spent here, I feel I've learned many things. For instance, the midday sun, coupled with blazing heat radiating from the city's architecture, was unbearable. Even with fire-resistant enchantments, it felt as if I was being slow roasted. Nearly half my time in the city was spent lazing about in the shallows, seeking shade under the palms and harvesting fallen fruit, all while trying to stave off heat stroke. I would watch the massive oasis birds stride through the shallows, their size dwarfing most of the buildings back at home. I also received many visitors in the days I spent here, each one extending a literal warm welcome to Ilderheim, along with a small, freshly smelted trinket. Their kindness was palpable, and each giant brought with them plenty of questions about the world beyond the dunes. By the end of my first week, I was surprised to awaken to a new structure along the shoreline, a ceramic hut, perfect for one person and internally cooled by flowing oasis water. At night, when the desert sun dips below the horizon, the city remains pleasantly warm, heated by the few giants busy working throughout the night. I became acquainted with one particular fire giant, Abkanar. who tolerated my presence and humored my prodding questions. The two of us established a routine. I would spend my nights sitting outside in the sand, observing his craftsmanship from the doorway of the forge room and eagerly documenting the process. He was crafting a breastplate, black as obsidian, using a clawed finger to mark intricate depressions into the metal. On its back was a bucket-like apparatus, which I was told would house a roaring flame, designed to keep the wearer warm throughout the night. Hung to cool next to him was a gorget of the same material, its collar inlaid with small pear-shaped rubies. With a smile on his face, he confessed this piece of craftsmanship was for a lover. There was a simplicity to this life, and I enjoyed it greatly, but inside, I felt a deep yearning for more. I spent the night in heavy contemplation before drifting off to sleep. That morning, I was awoken by the thunderous sound of giants rushing towards the oasis. Looking out the window, I witnessed one giant, in a single swift movement, swing onto the back of one of the oasis's colossal birds before heading towards the entrance of Ilderheim. I rushed out of my hut, scrolls and dagger in hand, and ran to Abkanar's, who was still deep in his work. Together, we made our way to the edge of Ilderheim, along with dozens of other giants. I was ready for conflict, but instead, before me stood 3 young fire giants, about 18 feet tall, covered in makeshift armor from their time in the dunes. The younglings, named Kez, Mitt, and Gil, were beaming with pride, having finally made it back to their home. Reja led the giants to the oasis and soaked the new arrivals in its water the same as I have. As they emerged, they were reborn as Kizara, Mitarab, and Gilnadir. It was a beautiful moment, but as I stood at the edge of the oasis, staring down in the glossy water, I couldn't help but long for home. Shortly after the ceremony, I confided in Reja that I was looking to depart from Ilderheim. She seemed surprised at first, but quickly came to terms with the idea. Nodding in agreement, she understood how hard it is to resist the urge to wander, especially back to the place you call home. From her personal belongings, I was gifted a scroll of teleportation, a powerful spell scavenged from the desert years prior. I thanked her for her people's hospitality and set off for my hut, stopping by Abkanar's to wish him well in his endeavors and to express my intent in returning soon. I gathered my belongings and casted the spell. With a blast of arcane energy, I was warped from my hut and back into the armchair in my study. My head light, I took a moment to collect myself. I spent the afternoon decorating my library with the various trinkets from my travels before seating myself at the desk and getting straight to work on documenting my experience in vivid detail.